You can feel it, can't you? It's not just exhaustion, it's not confusion, it's something deeper, something ancient. As if your soul is trying to rise while the world tightens its grip. As if every step forward invites a new pressure. And somewhere deep down, you know this isn't random. You made a decision. You stopped giving in to the impulses that once ruled you. You began to retain. And with that, a shift began. Suddenly things moved. Doors opened. Women looked at you differently. Opportunities appeared. Your presence changed, and the world responded. But along with the rise came something else. The pressure, the temptation, the sudden resistance. And a voice inside you whispered, "If I'm doing everything right, why does life feel like a battlefield?" The answer is simple but profound. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. When a man chooses to retain his energy, he doesn't just grow, he emits. He awakens a force most men never touch. And that force disrupts the invisible systems that thrive on your weakness. You become more than just disciplined. You become magnetic. You become sacred. And you become seen, not just by people, but by powers. Because real power can't be hidden. And when a man stops leaking his fire, his spirit becomes visible. That visibility is both a blessing and a test. You are no longer a ghost in the crowd. You are no longer a man asleep in his flesh. You are becoming what the world forgot to honor, a man in possession of his own soul. But now that you're visible, you're also being watched. And what watches you will test you. The temptations you now face are not signs of failure. They are signs that you are crossing into sacred territory. And only those who are ready will stay on this path. If this message touched something inside, you type 99 in the comments below. Don't overthink it. That number is a signal, a silent mark of those who remember. Let it be your confirmation that you hear the call and that you're not alone. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel now, we're building something rare, a brotherhood of men who choose sovereignty over slavery. Help us reach our first 1,000 awakened subscribers. This isn't just a channel, it's a sanctuary for those who refuse to kneel. Now that you've remembered who you are, let's go deeper. Because the moment you begin to retain everything, your energy, your presence, your destiny, begins to change. Let's begin with what shifts first. What really happens when you start to retain? Everything begins in silence. There is no lightning, no applause, no visible crown placed on your head, only a subtle shift, a quiet realignment, as if something deep beneath your skin had moved. And yet, somehow, the world begins to respond. You begin to feel heavier, not with burden, but with presence. Your feet feel firmer on the ground. Your eyes linger longer on truth. Your words become fewer. But when you speak, people listen. Not because you've changed how you talk, but because something else is speaking through you. This is the first mark of a man who has begun to retain. He no longer needs to try to be heard. He is heard by the gravity of his silence. Most men walk into a room hoping to be seen. You begin to be seen before you arrive, and not by effort, by frequency, because what you're holding is more than just semen. You're holding life, force, the blueprint of creation itself. And when that energy is no longer wasted, it begins to gather, it begins to pressurize. And that pressure is felt by the air, by the people around you, by the very fabric of reality. Women feel it first, especially those who are sensitive. They may not be able to explain it, but they know something is different about you. It's not your haircut, it's not your clothes, it's not even your body. It's the field you carry. Your aura begins to thicken. Your energy no longer scatters, it concentrates. And that concentration is rare. And what is rare attracts. But this is not attraction in the superficial sense. This isn't about seduction. This is the recognition of power withheld. Because in a world of men who spill themselves for every flashing temptation, the man who holds shines. You begin to walk differently. Not because you're trying, but because your core is full. Your steps are steadier. Your back is straighter. Your eyes hold longer contact, not to dominate, but because you have nothing to hide. Your silence becomes sacred, no longer a sign of weakness, but of mastery, because only the man who is full inside can be still without fear, and the world, it notices. But more importantly, you notice. You start to feel something like clarity. Moments slow down. Thoughts become more precise. Your intuition sharpens, and the decisions that once felt cloudy now seem obvious. Why? Because when you stop leaking energy, your mind becomes a temple again. Your inner voice, no longer muffled by indulgence, becomes audible. You start to hear yourself clearly, perhaps for the first time in your life. And life begins to listen back. Suddenly, doors that once seemed sealed begin to open. Not because you begged, but because your vibration changed. People call it luck. But it isn't luck. It's alignment. It's the universe responding to a man who has chosen to master himself. Because energy withheld is energy redirected. And when it's redirected, it builds. It builds vision. It builds momentum. It builds presence. And presence is power. You will notice that people begin to treat you differently. They respect your time more. They speak to you more carefully. They ask for your opinion, even when you didn't offer it, not because you demanded it, but because they can feel something in you that cannot be faked. This is only the beginning. Because with every day of retention, this internal transformation deepens. It sharpens your edges and solidifies your center. And that center becomes immovable. But here's the truth. What you are gaining also makes you visible to things you cannot yet see. And while you begin to attract more of what you desire, you will also begin to attract more of what is designed to break you. Because the rise of your power does not go unnoticed, not just by people, but by systems, by shadows, by energies that survive off of unconscious men. So as your energy grows, so does the resistance. And that is exactly what we'll uncover next. Why does the man who retains become a magnet? Not just for light, but for darkness as well. You don't speak it. You don't announce it. You don't wear it like a badge. But something about you has changed, and the world can feel it. There's a kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard, who doesn't need to chase, posture, or display, because everything about him already radiates. Not in words, but in frequency. This is the silent magnetism of the chosen ones. The moment a man begins to hold his essence, truly hold it, something sacred begins to build within him. Not just testosterone, not just tension, but density. A spiritual gravity that pulls eyes without trying, that commands respect without demand, that attracts attention, even when you're hidden in the corner of the room. And it is this gravity that sets you apart. Most men are loud because they are hollow. They speak in excess to hide their lack of substance. They project, exaggerate, and perform because silence terrifies them, because in silence, their emptiness is exposed. But the man who retains, he is different. His silence is not absence. It is authority. It is presence. It is the weight of a man who contains. Because when a man stops releasing his power into every shallow pleasure, that power doesn't disappear. It consolidates, and the field around him begins to shift. You walk into a space, and people turn their heads, but they don't know why. Women sense something primal and unfamiliar. They feel the heat, the intensity, the potential. Not because you're flashy, but because you are full. And what is full emanates. This energy speaks long before your words do. It enters the room before your body. It shakes the environment ever so slightly. It's in your posture, your breath, the calm behind your eyes, the restraint in your hands, the rhythm of your walk. It's not about dominance. It's not about aggression. It's about command, quiet, grounded, undeniable. And this is why retention is more than self-control. It's transmutation. Your energy, once used for momentary pleasure, is now rising. It no longer escapes through your lower centers. It climbs. It informs your speech. It sharpens your mind. It fortifies your boundaries. You begin to sense when a conversation is wrong, when a person's energy is off, when a room isn't safe. Your instincts no longer whisper, they roar, because now your energy is no longer scattered. It's focused, and focus is felt. You no longer need to prove anything. Your presence is the proof. This is why women are drawn to you differently. Not in excitement, but in reverence. They sense restraint. And restraint in a man is rare. They sense discipline. And discipline in a man is sacred. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it in their bones. In a world of overexposed, emotionally scattered men, you are the exception. And exceptions are magnetic. But this power is not for decoration. It is not for ego. It is not for indulgence. It is for direction. Because when a man begins to radiate like this, he also begins to attract more than admiration. He begins to attract temptation. And that's where we must go next. The moment you begin to shine, the shadows start to notice. This is one of the most misunderstood truths on the path of retention. What attracts also tests. What pulls in the light also calls forth the dark. You begin to notice it quickly. Just when everything seems to be aligning. When women start looking at you differently. When money starts moving. When people start offering you things you always wanted. You begin to feel a quiet warning inside. As if something is watching you. As if the very things you used to pray for now come with a hidden cost, and that's because they do. Attraction is real. But not all attraction is blessing. Some of it is bait. Not all the eyes that admire you come with pure intention. Not every opportunity is an open door. Some are traps, carefully designed, spiritually camouflaged, offering exactly what your ego wants, while pulling you away from what your soul needs. Because when you begin to radiate power, you become irresistible not only to women, but to the forces that feed on men like you. They don't attack your strength directly. They flatter it. They don't confront your discipline. They seduce it. The test doesn't always come with a fight. It comes with a smile, a compliment, a new connection that feels different, a just this once opportunity, an invitation that touches exactly the part of you that still craves validation. Because energy, real, retained energy, is spiritual currency. And once you start carrying it, the world begins to ask, what will you spend it on? And many men spend it where it shines. Where they feel desired, seen, wanted. But wanted by what? This is the question most never stop to ask. They feel the pull and they assume it's destiny. But what if it's distraction? What if it's not the reward for your growth, but the test? Because the truth is this. When a man starts to become rare, he also becomes hunted. You will start to feel it. Eyes on you, messages from nowhere, sudden interest from people who never noticed you before, opportunities that seem too good, too easy, too perfectly timed. And if you're still carrying the hunger to be seen, to be validated, to be touched, you'll bite the bait. Not because you are weak, but because you didn't realize the trap comes dressed as a gift. That's how spiritual warfare works. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't attack you with force. It tempts you with pleasure. Because the enemy doesn't care about the men who waste themselves daily. It cares about the ones who are starting to carry weight. The ones who are becoming temples. The ones who are remembering who they are. So remember this. The attraction you feel from others when you're retaining is real. It's primal. It's magnetic. But it's also dangerous. Because that magnetic field you're building, that powerful charge of energy inside you, it doesn't filter what it pulls. It draws in the sacred and the seductive, the genuine and the parasitic, the allies and the assassins. And the only thing that will protect you in that moment is discernment. Not desire, not pride, not performance, but spiritual clarity. You must learn to see beyond the smile, beyond the flattery, beyond the offer. To ask, not with your mind, but with your spirit. Does this align with my path, or is it here to pull me away from it? Because the energy you're building is not just making you more attractive. It's turning you into a magnet for every test you've been avoiding your whole life. And that brings us to the battlefield. Because not all traps live outside you, some live inside. And the greatest war a retaining man will ever fight is not against women or wealth or temptation itself, but against the parts of himself that still want to be ruled. Not all wars are fought with swords, not all enemies wear faces. Some battles are silent, internal, and deadly. This is the hidden war every man enters the moment he chooses to retain. It doesn't happen out there. It begins in the space no one else can see, the inner temple. And the enemy? It wears your voice. It uses your desires. It speaks through your impatience. Because once you choose to rise, the first to resist your growth is not the world. It is you. It's the part of you that still wants comfort, the part that craves escape when the pressure builds. The voice that whispers, just one release, just one message. You've earned it. It's not that serious. It's subtle. It's logical. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because this war is not about strength. It's about structure. Can you hold your fire without letting it consume you? Can you carry your tension without breaking under it? Can you stand still when everything in you wants to run? This is where many men fall, not because they lack power, but because they never built a foundation for it. They begin to rise, to retain, to radiate, and suddenly they are seen, admired, desired, and instead of staying grounded, they begin to reach for validation, for approval, for proof that they are finally enough. But here's the truth that will save you. If you're still trying to be seen, you're still vulnerable. If you're still trying to prove, you're still unstable, and anything built without stability will collapse. The battlefield of the retaining man is the moment between the urge and the action. That space, the pause, is where power is forged. And the longer you stand in that space, the more your energy transforms. You begin to feel it. That fire doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish with discipline. It climbs. It turns into vision, focus, precision. It sharpens your instincts. It thickens your presence, but only if you hold it. Only if you choose purpose over impulse, over and over again. Because here's what no one tells you. When you retain, your power doesn't just grow. It becomes visible to everything, including the forces that hate your awakening. And so, the attacks will come, sometimes as lust, sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as doubt, boredom, confusion, sometimes in the form of people, sent not to bless, but to drain. But the true attack is always on your focus. Because the moment you lose your focus, you stop building. You scatter, you leak, and all that energy you worked so hard to store is gone. So the real battlefield is not sex. It's not the woman. It's not the offer. It's not the image. It's the moment you decide, who am I building for? Who am I becoming? What is this fire inside me truly for? Because if your energy has no direction, your retention is just repression. And repression always seeks a way to escape. But when you give that energy a mission, everything shifts. You are no longer a man resisting pleasure. You are a man constructing presence. And presence builds kingdoms. Now you understand, the true war isn't outside. It's not fought with enemies you can see. It's fought inside the chambers of your own mind. And every time you win that battle, every time you choose focus over fantasy, vision over vanity, discipline over desperation, you become more than a man. You become a vessel, a conductor of sacred force, a warrior of purpose. But now comes the turning point. You've held your fire. You've stood in the tension. You've walked the battlefield. So what happens next? What does this energy begin to build in your life, in your mind, in your spirit, in your destiny, when it's finally reclaimed from pleasure and turned toward creation? Retention is not just about what you resist. It's about what you build with what you hold. There comes a moment in every man's path where the energy he once spilled in silence now begins to speak, not through noise, but through manifestation. This is the shift. At first, you feel tension, you feel pressure, you feel a burning inside that has nowhere to go. But if you do not run from it, if you do not waste it, that fire becomes fuel. fuel for clarity, fuel for purpose, fuel for creation. Most men waste their energy seeking pleasure, but the man who retains learns to channel it. And when that channel opens, something extraordinary happens. Your reality starts to move. Ideas become actions, visions gain momentum, connections appear, solutions arrive, and things that once felt distant, opportunities, partnerships, spiritual insight, begin to orbit you naturally, not by effort, by vibration, because the same energy that creates life biologically creates results spiritually. And when you're no longer draining that energy through temporary indulgence, you begin to access the higher currents of your being. You don't just think faster, you see clearer. You don't just react better, you intuit sooner. You become more than reactive, you become creative. You speak less, but your words have weight. You move slower, but your steps have direction. You sleep deeper, you wake up earlier, you stop wandering and start building, and the world feels it. People trust you more, without knowing why. Men look to you for structure. Women feel safe in your presence. Because your energy no longer whispers confusion, it declares stability. You are no longer a man scattered across moments of desire. You are a man collected, whole, coherent. And that coherence attracts everything aligned with your mission. This is where creation begins, not with strategies, not with hustle, not even with effort, with alignment. Because when your energy is aligned, it becomes magnetic, and what you once chased now arrives. But here's the beauty. Now that it arrives, you are ready to receive it. Not like a starving man begging for a crumb, but like a builder, like a king, prepared to hold what he once could not. This is why retention is not just resistance, it is preparation. You are preparing your vessel, you are anchoring your vision, you are sharpening your spirit, and life, sensing this readiness, begins to cooperate. What others call luck, you know, is vibration. What others call coincidence, you know, is consequence, the consequence of inner mastery. But this power doesn't just affect your mind or your relationships, it changes your presence. You no longer need to seek, you no longer chase. Because the man who retains doesn't run after energy, he radiates it. You become a source, not a seeker. You carry fire, and fire creates. Now you're beginning to understand. What you once thought was sacrifice was actually sacred storage. You've been storing fire, you've been accumulating force, and now it wants to move. But this movement has a purpose. This creation has a direction. And to walk in that direction, you need to be anchored, because the higher you rise in creative power, the more the world will pull on your roots. Growth has a price, and no one warns you how steep it truly is. They tell you about the rewards, the clarity, the focus, the power. They speak of respect, of attraction, of inner fire. But what they rarely speak of is this. Elevation isolates. The moment you begin to rise, you begin to drift. Not because you want to, but because you no longer resonate with the world you once knew. You start to notice it slowly. The conversations that once entertained you now bore you. The friends who used to feel like home now feel distant. The places that once gave you escape now drain your energy. And the people who used to get you now look at you like a stranger, because you are. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And this space in between, it's a desert. You walk it alone. This is the hidden cost of retention, the disconnection. You're not just holding back your semen. You're holding back from the systems, patterns, and relationships that once defined your identity. And as you shed them, you begin to realize how few can walk with you through that shedding. People don't understand what they can't feel. They don't understand why you're no longer interested in wasting time, why you value silence over stimulation, why you're protecting your energy like it's gold, because for them, it's invisible. But for you, it's everything. And that's where the pain sets in. Because you long to be understood. You long for someone to look you in the eye and say, I see what you're carrying. But often, no one does. You begin To feel like an exile, not punished, but set apart. Not because you're better, but because you're different. And different is threatening to those who haven't begun, and so the world, in subtle ways, begins to push you to come back down, to relax, to loosen up, to be normal again. But there is no normal once your soul has remembered who you are. And so you walk. Through silence, through distance, through long nights and heavy mornings, through inner doubt and spiritual fatigue. Not because you failed, but because you're being refined. There is a sacred alchemy in this, solitude. In the space where the voices fade and only your own voice remains. At first it's haunting, then it becomes holy. Because in that silence, you begin to meet the parts of you that were buried beneath noise. You begin to hear the voice of your purpose, and you begin to remember, I was not made for the crowd. I was made for the calling. And the calling is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like emptiness, like loss, like a hollow space where your old life used to live. But what feels like isolation is actually consecration. You are not being abandoned. You are being prepared. You are being cleared of what cannot follow you to the next level. You are being stripped of what can't hold the weight of the man you are becoming. And that process feels brutal. Because every time you grow, something must be left behind. This is why the rarest men in history walked alone before they walked in power. Not because they were unloved, but because they were being molded in silence. Silence is the womb of kings, and you, whether you believe it yet or not, are being crowned in private. And that crown is not made of gold. It is made of presence, of restraint, of spiritual gravity, of divine alignment. But before you can wear it, you must be willing to be misunderstood. You must be willing to let go of comfort, of company, of validation. Because what's coming requires capacity, and capacity is only built in the quiet. So, if you feel alone right now, you're not failing. You're not broken, you're not lost, you're being chosen. And chosen men are always carved in shadow. But what happens when the silence is broken? What happens when temptation returns, not in darkness, but in disguise? What happens when the next level of the test comes dressed as everything you ever wanted? Next, we step into the final temptation, not the obvious fall, but the hidden one, the kind that enters your life wrapped in light. Now you know. Your fire is not a curse. Your silence is not a punishment. Your isolation was never abandonment. It was initiation. Everything you felt, the tension, the attraction, the pressure, the tests, was not there to destroy you. It was there to refine you, to reveal the man that was always buried beneath the noise. The man the world was never ready for. The man your soul came here to remember. You were never ordinary. You were never meant to be one more in the crowd. And that strange feeling, the one that made you feel like a misfit in this world, wasn't brokenness. It was remembrance. You came here carrying a sacred pattern, a vibration, a responsibility, a purpose. And your energy, your seed, your essence, has always carried the blueprint of that purpose. When you chose to retain it, you chose to reawaken the force that the system tried to bury. You chose to become the kind of man that makes the darkness tremble, not because you fight like others, but because your presence alone shifts reality. You felt it. The doors that opened, the eyes that watched, the voices that tested, the silence that held you. All of it was the universe asking you one question. Are you ready to carry the weight of your own power? Because true power is not what you gain. It's what you govern. And the man who governs his energy governs his destiny. This isn't just about semen retention. It's about sovereignty. It's about remembrance. It's about becoming the man the world forgot could exist. You are not just a body. You are a field. You are a conductor of divine will. And every drop you've retained, every urge you've mastered, every distraction you've walked away from was building something eternal inside of you. Now, your body has become a temple, your mind a sword, your spirit a throne. This is not theory. This is spiritual law in motion. And you have just stepped into alignment with that law. And from here forward, your life will never be the same. You no longer live like a man chasing pleasure. You live like a man building legacy. You don't seek validation. You radiate presence. You don't follow trends. You embody truth. And the forces that once hunted you, now they recognize your frequency. They may still test you, but they can no longer break you. Because now, you remember who you are. A king in silence. A warrior of stillness. A temple of sacred fire. And no one can take that from you. So walk forward, not with pride, but with certainty, knowing that you are carrying something holy, and that every step you take in mastery is a step that reshapes the world around you. This is the way of the rare. This is the path of the chosen. This is the birth of the sovereign man. And if this message spoke to something ancient inside you, don't leave in silence. Type 99 in the comments. Let your presence be known, not for attention, but for alignment. A declaration in the spiritual realm that you heard the call, and you answered. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel now. We are walking toward 1,000 awakened men, not just viewers, guardians, builders, brothers. This isn't just content, it's consecration. Check out our other videos. Each one is a key, a signal, a mirror for the man you're becoming. And if there's a brother in your life still lost in the noise, share this video with him. Sometimes, all it takes is one message to wake a sleeping king. You are not alone. Here is your invisible training ground. Now rise. You are not a victim of desire. You are the priest of your own power. And the world has been waiting for you to remember that.